All right, everybody. It's been a little while, but I'm back. Happy to share that I've completed Springboard's UX UI career track course. It's very exciting. I completed about 2 weeks ago and have been on top of the job search ever since. Okay, I took a few days off to celebrate, but it's been interesting, especially given everything that's going on in the world right now. So I believe my last review was about 75% of the way in. I'd completed one of the capstones, and I had a capstone and the industry design partnership to go. So the second capstone was a little faster and a little less structured and a little less, I want to say, intense than the first one. The first one went through nearly every step of a UX design process that you might encounter, from primary research to secondary research to empathy diagrams to creating personas to creating, establishing MVP lines, low fidelity mockups, high fidelity mockups, user testing, which was great. It was a great initial exposure to how things would be done in a real UX environment. The second capstone was a little lighter. So the biggest difference is you're assigned a subject. Well, rather, there's 4 subjects to choose from, but you don't have free range as you did in the first capstone. Second thing, instead of experiencing or revisiting each potential option of, what activity you might encounter in the UX process, you're giving the option to choose, like primary or secondary research, empathy diagram or persona, guerrilla testing or, face-to-face testing, monitored or unmonitored testing. So yeah, it's a little shorter, which caught me by surprise, but it's still good to get a second project under your belt and get that perspective of what a project would look like in the real world. Speaking of the real world, probably the most important part of the course is the industry design partnership, an opportunity for you to work with a real company and see what it's like under the hood, but also get that experience under your belt so you can have at least something to go to a potential employer with. So the industry design partnership starts by getting paired with a startup, usually a startup or a smaller company. When you apply for we'll call it the IDP, when you apply for the IDP, you have the opportunity to list a couple interests, and the team will do their best to partner you with a company that will allow you to explore those interests a little deeper. I'm not sure how well they do this across the board, but I'd listed AR and travel as interests that I'd like to pursue. And I got paired with a company that was doing exactly that. I had the opportunity to work on a new AR feature that was to be incorporated into a travel and entertainment app, I was absolutely thrilled about. The IDP is meant to last about 4 weeks, and you're meant to spend about 10 or 15 hours per week on it. So it's great if you're taking the course full time, double up, work on your portfolio while you're doing this, knock out some of those interviewing, professional practice related units. If you're doing it part-time, depending on how much time you're committing, it might take up all of your allotted time for the course. So I ended up working for 5 weeks. I stretched out a little bit because in the 4th week, I started pursuing some job opportunities and was a little less focused. So I wanted to make sure I followed through with my commitment on the project. But it was great. The mentor, Springboard is essentially hands-off during the IDP. Once you're matched with the representative of the company, it's up to you to establish a schedule, book calls with that representative. You can do as little or as much as you want. I have a deep background in project management and design, So in that initial call, I established the scope, what what I would contribute, the timeline for contributing that, like what I would do week 1, week 2, week 3, then finally week 4. And that was a roadmap that was revisited on a weekly basis. So I'd suggest that if you don't already do something like that, it's a really great way to keep yourself on track. Not only that, but make sure that everybody's on the same page with regards to what you're going to be doing, what the company's expectations are, and what your understanding of the commitment is. So at the end of the 4 weeks, you still have your mentor calls, so you can utilize your mentor to bounce ideas off them. Try to, if you're curious about something that's happening with the company, ask your mentor, is this a typical thing? Is this weird? What should I do? Really just kind of get advice. So your calls continue across, or while you're in the IDP. And once the IDP is complete, as I understand it, your company representative doesn't really have anything to do with the sign-off of the project. Once you put together the case study for your IDP and share that with your mentor, it's up to the mentor to determine whether it's passing or not, which is a little bit surprising. I would have thought that the company representative would have had more involvement in the scoring of the students' participation. So right, that covers Capstone 2, covers the IDP. Aside from that, there are just a few kind of units on interviewing, preparing for mock interviews, which is the other major aspect of the last portion of the course. So there are 4 interviews / presentations that you have to pass in order to finish the course, and you have 2 chances for each of those interviews / presentations to pass. And if you don't, then you become ineligible for the job placement guarantee, which is important to remember. So the first of these 4 takes place very early on in the course. It's a design research presentation. I think it's maybe about 20% of the way through, 25%, something like that. But you go all the way through the course until you have the final 3. And these 3 are mock interviews, which are meant to simulate interactions that you would have with a potential employer while you're interviewing with them during your job search process. So the first, you can take them in any sequence, but the first one that I took was the behavioral interview. This one is given to you by a career coach, and it's not technical at all. It's a series of more or less typical questions that a company might ask you about why you're interested in working with them, what are your greatest weaknesses, tell me about a time you failed, what are your biggest skills. Google top interview questions and these questions will come up. So nothing tricky, but it's good to have a comfortable understanding of your background and be prepared to answer any of these types of questions because they're going to be quite similar as you interview with potential companies. So that was the behavioral interview. The second one I took was the portfolio review. So this involves sharing your portfolio with a mentor. This is no longer a career coach. This is with a mentor, not necessarily your mentor, but a mentor that's assigned to you. And it's really walking through your portfolio. And my experience wasn't so much walking through the portfolio, but my interviewer wanted me to choose a project, and then he went through it and started asking me questions about it. So absolutely be prepared to discuss any one of your projects in detail. Be prepared to talk about why you made certain decisions about design, about flow, about configuration of a screen, about flow of different screens. The third interview, mock interview, is a whiteboarding interview, which is probably the one I had the most fun with. I thought about getting one of those post-it easel, kind of big easels that you see in office rooms sometimes, but I went ahead, I got an actual whiteboard, 2 feet by 3 feet, nice and big for lots of room to sketch, and whiteboard dry erase markers. Figured why not simulate it as much as I can. A little bit pricey, but worth it. So it's a little bit tricky. You set up the whiteboard and you set up your computer so it's recording the whiteboard and you're doing your thing. So it's ideal to set up this whiteboard so it's filling as much of the screen as possible. So the idea of the whiteboard challenge is you're partnered with another mentor. Again, not necessarily yours. It's random. And the mentor, I should say interviewer, gives you a prompt and asks you to solve that prompt, solve that problem, right? The idea of the mock interview is to assess how you approach a problem, how you pick apart data, how you seek and gather information. So my prompt was to design an interface for a series of scooters and associated docking stations. And that was it. It was very high level. So an important aspect of this interview is for you to ask questions of the interviewer. You're not going to have all the information. They're going to want to see what you think is important to ask about. Ask all the questions you want. For example, I set up a couple of my own criteria. We're going to assume that people using these are a mix of locals, just trying to get to work, and tourists, trying to use an alternate mode of transportation to get to the local attractions. From there, you really just kind of whiteboard out your thought process. After establishing the constraints, I started sketching out user flows. I sketched out a couple mocked up screens, just start getting an idea of what that would look like. And that's really, really where it ended. So it was about 45 minutes, but honestly, it was quite intense. There was a lot of back and forth between the interviewer and I. And if you do it right, I think you'll have a lot of scribbles on the whiteboard. So I had a lot of fun with it. And I passed every one of them the first time. So I think as long as you're engaged, as long as you are active across the board, right? And as long as you're prepared, you should do well with these interviews. So that's really, excuse me, the last 25% or so of the course. I've just started getting into the job search, the career aspect. It does take a little while. Once you're 100% completed the course, you apply to formally complete. So there's kind of like a survey where they ask you about your experiences, ask you to rate your mentor, your student advisor, and at that point your curriculum is reviewed just to make sure everything is complete. So a career coach will comment on career-related stuff like updating your LinkedIn profile, your resume and such. Your mentor will be responsible for making sure all of the technical projects are ticked off. That takes a couple days, and once that's complete, you'll get an email saying, congratulations, you finished the course, you're a rock star, which is a very exciting moment. Ultimately, I'm still waiting for this, but ultimately they send you a certificate, which is fantastic. I'm not sure if it's digital or physical, but just another thing to hang up on your wall. So that's where I am right now. The next step really is to get access to the, for lack of a better term, job search, job hunt tools. And that's changed a little bit from when I signed up for the course. So initially, your job search or your job guarantee was for 6 months. If you didn't find a job within 6 months, you get a refund of your tuition, which is fantastic, right? That's why I signed up for the course. It's a guarantee I'll get a job or I'll get my money back, and then I can survive a little longer while I'm looking for a job. Recently, they've extended it. They've given students the option to extend, given COVID, given the state of the economy. So you have an option to extend your job search guarantee by 6 months for 12 months total. But honestly, from what I understand, and this may change, it's kind of in flux at the moment, but as it is today, the only additional benefit that you get from extending to 12 months are continued calls with your mentor. Again, as I understand it, within that 6 months, you have, I think, bi-weekly, coaching calls every 2 weeks. You have, I believe, access to the Slack community, and you have access to job boards. But a recent addition is access to the placements team, where members of the team will actively try to match you and your skills and your experience with relevant roles, which is huge. That's absolutely new since I signed up 6 months ago, and going to be a huge benefit. So that's about it for now. I'm hitting Angel's List hard. I've applied to several jobs, got a couple little nibbles here and there, so there's activity. But this was only about a week ago, so I imagine it takes some time. So that's it for now. Maybe at some point I'll have a flashier video, but it's pretty basic. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're still with me. And I expect to provide another update, hopefully in a few weeks, on my job search, and maybe, who knows, even about my new job.